Very much a pleasure to be here, Elizabeth. As you said pretty much it all. We've been friends for a long time, and you know that I have admired you for many, many years, and have had the great pleasure of following your career and your pathway and your passions, and being as supportive as I possibly can. And it's been a great source of inspiration for me, quite frankly. Um,
Thank you.
my I guess my background is that I grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. My mother was a nurse anesthetist. My father was a pharmacist, and they were very and parents that, like many parents, wanted their children to do better than they did, succeed and so forth. And
Mhm.
it was a pleasure growing up with them and growing up in an island environment like that. I came to the States to go to college. I went to Princeton University. I majored in chemistry with the thought that I might go to medical school. But found out I was a bit too lazy for all that. So I just went to work. I worked for a pharmaceutical company, and then ultimately decided to go to business school. And that started my career in finance. I worked at an investment bank on Wall Street for 10 years, and enjoyed it, but found that also wasn't exactly what was thrilling to me. I wouldn't have called it a passion per se, but there were aspects.
Mhm.
I ultimately got married, and at the time that I got married, my husband is English, and we had talked about having children, but not really. We were both a little on the fence about it, quite frankly. I was a little older. I'm one of four children. I have a brother and two younger sisters. I knew firsthand what it was like to be a mom. Well, when I said I knew, I saw the way my mother and my father had to rear and parent four children. It was quite something. So I was a little bit hesitant, but ultimately, after a few years of marriage, we decided to go ahead and try to get pregnant. And we were both pretty much on the same page about it.
Mhm.
My views, the way I was raised, and my way of seeing things was that if you decide to become a parent, to travel down that road of and you take on that responsibility 100%, as much as you possibly can. And
Mhm.
I felt that if I could have lived my life without having children, but if I decided to have a child, then I wanted to I took my responsibilities very seriously, and I felt that it was important to acknowledge that. I knew
Mhm.
that I had choices in terms of making decisions about uh, carrying the life, deciding to end the pregnancy, what have you. And I decided that unless there was something that I could not change, unless there was something that where my child was not going to be a, I was 40 years old at that time, and that's considered to be, but advanced maternal age. And
Mhm.
so there are some genetic disabilities and genetic abnormalities that are associated
Mhm.
with being an older mom, and one of them
Mhm.
is Down syndrome. And
Mhm.
but I, quite frankly, like all parents, I like to think when they started down this journey, I had hoped for the best. I prayed for a happy and healthy baby. Those were my prayers. And so I was surprised when she was born, and she was diagnosed with Down syndrome pretty quickly. Down syndrome is initially when there are physical characteristics that identify a child with Down syndrome, and so usually they can make that diagnosis pretty quickly, and they
Mhm.
did within minutes of her birth. And it was there's no question that it was very, very, very shocking and scary. It
If
was
I
not.
Just second, just for a quick
Mhm.
second,
Of course.
throughout throughout the pregnancy, I'm sure, being the meticulous person you were going for your exams and your labs. Were there any indicators that ever showed up? Because
Well, that's a very good question.
he told me that I was also on the older side. I was like, how is 33 older, right? And so they had me go through a whole bunch of tests just to make sure, he would be okay. But
it's funny because I was 40, but I have to tell you, mentally, I really felt like I was 26. I kind of chugged along as if I were, it's so funny, and they were, advanced maternal age, an older mother. I'm like, really? I had no idea. But yes, so that's an excellent question because it speaks to my philosophy or the way that I wanted to approach pregnancy. And that was that unless there, as I said, there was something that I could change or something that needed to be done to help have the best outcome, then I wasn't going to do a whole host of prenatal testing. I said, there's no point. Let me know if there's something I can change or something that I can do that's going to help my child. But unless there's something that can be done at that moment, I just want to enjoy the pregnancy as much as I can. And I don't want to worry. I don't want to, be concerned and worried about something that I can't change because it wouldn't change my decision. I was still going to bring this child to term and be the best mother I could be. And so I was fortunate to have an OBGYN who was on board with me. A wonderful woman who just recently retired, as a matter of fact. And she had been my gynecologist all those years before. And I said to her, look, I don't want to come in here every week for a bunch of different testing. You tell me exactly what you need as, to be my doctor and what's going to be helpful to you. But if I don't want to know, basically, I don't want to know if there's a problem. I'll deal with the problem when it's in front of me. And it's funny because that's typically just my basic personality. I'm better in a crisis, So she was on board with that, and she wanted just one or two tests. And one was a, like a first level ultrasound. So just the first ultrasound to kind of give you a sense of what was going on. And that was, at those times, I think they did ultrasounds less than they do now. I think they do a bit more often now. But let's say my recollection anyway was that I was about 3 months into it. And at that point, it showed something called a echogenic foci, I think it's the actual term. But it was the way it was described to me was a bright spot. So it was a bright spot in the heart and a bright spot in the brain. And at that point, wow.
That sounds very poetic and beautiful. Bright spot in the heart.
Doesn't it? I thought so too. But that said, it was definitely associated with some genetic abnormalities, but not necessarily indicative of them. So it was something to keep in mind, but the only way that I would know for sure is if I wanted to do an amniocentesis. And I did not want to do an amnio. At that time, one, as I said, it wouldn't have changed anything. And two, there were some risks, higher risks associated with amnios, and I did not want to do that. And so the pregnancy chugged along. I didn't feel great, but I wasn't the worst pregnancy. I didn't feel horrible. Well, I did feel kind of horrible, frankly, but I moved along with my life. And at one point, probably maybe about 6 or 7 months into it, I was sent or asked to go get a nuchal fold test, which is a test that looks at the way the fold, the tissue is developing in a fetus's neck or a baby's neck, something of this. So I'm dreadful at the actual details of these things. And I was busy. I was working. I had a business, and I just went to the testing center and was prepared to do it. I figured that if my doctor had asked for it, it was something that she wanted. After waiting quite a long time, I finally said, look, I really have to go. I've got, appointments or anything. Can I reschedule this? And frankly, what is this all about anyway? And they told me it was a test to to see if there was any issues of potential problems. And I just said, you know what, I don't want to do this. I've already talked to my doctor about this. I'm not doing any of these tests. I'm out of here. And diagnostician, I can't remember how to say the word, but the technician was really said, well, hold on a minute. We really want you to talk to, we don't want you to leave. Why don't you talk to our genetic counselor? It was quite, they were quite insistent that I speak to a genetic counselor. So I did sit down with her, and they said, well,
sounds really informing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was what I was frustrated because I felt that my wishes for how I wanted my pregnancy to go were not being heard, that I wasn't being heard, and that was bothersome. And I sat down with this person. I think it was a woman who, and I said, look, I'm not young. I'm 40 years old. I made this decision after several years of thought, and this is the way I want to go about things. I don't need to know unless there's something I can do that I don't need to know. When my baby arrives, we'll work it out if there's anything. But to be fair, I did not.
Okay.
No, and I didn't think. But not to belabor this point, but it does follow on. So the next time I saw my doctor, I said, listen, I don't understand what happened here. I described everything to her, and she was very serious about, her face was very serious. And she said, first of all, she apologized. She said, I should have not ordered that test. I didn't really think about it. She said, but I do have to tell you this one thing. I had a patient who also said the same thing to me. And actually, I should stop. That's not what happened. She said she apologized for sending me for the test. She said she was on board, and the only thing that I had to do after that was one last echocardiogram to see if there were any heart issues. Time passed. Moving on. It's time now. We're ready to go. I know I'm ready to go. I'm 36 weeks and I'm 37 weeks, and I was ready to have this baby. So when the delivery happened, and I thought she was lovely, and she looked perfectly fine to me, but I had no idea of what the physical characteristics are. And within moments, the delivering doctor, who was not my doctor, came to me and said, we're pretty sure your daughter has Down syndrome. So at that point, I'm just like, what? I hadn't heard of Down syndrome, but I didn't really know much about it. And I remember thinking, okay, this is definitely very different than what I expected. And I was very fearful. And it felt like, I remember thinking that all around me, it felt like the whole room was dark and black. And I said, what do I do? And I said to the doctor, I said, well, what do I do? And this was, to me, the very, very beginning of a wonderful motherhood for me. The doctor said to me, and I didn't know her at all. And she said, you do exactly what you were going to do. You love her, you feed her, you take care of her, and you take her home, and your life goes on. This is life. And I was like, wow, that's okay. She said, you're going to do exactly the same things. And that really was to me, the tone that was set for my motherhood, really, with her. I always say to people, everything I wanted as a mother, I have to my daughter. I didn't lack anything. She's now 21 years old, amazingly. And while there have been challenges for sure, and the mothering is different than maybe in some respects, or, there's so many things that I have to say many, many times before it sinks in. But, the love and affection and the mothering that I wanted, I got. Exactly. But back to the story of my doctor. When after the baby was born and I brought her in to meet the doctor and so forth, she said, yes, I have to tell you that I had a patient just a couple of years ago who has said the very same things to me, that she did not want to do prenatal testing and that she would not terminate under any circumstances. And they made that agreement. The child was born. This was this woman's 5th child, I think. So she had many children before. and the
Mhm.
child was born with a disability, and I'm pretty sure it was Down syndrome. And the mother
Mhm.
decided to give the child up for adoption. And that
Wow.
hurt my doctor so badly that she was so nervous about everything, because she was it apparently upset everyone in the practice, you know. So that was why she was so
Mhm.
nervous about adhering to what
Mhm.
I wanted and so forth. But so to answer your
Mhm.
question, yes, we had some indications, but certainly no. The only real way to know for sure is to do an amniocentesis.
Mhm. Mhm. So,
Um,
thank you so much for being so open about the journey. So, Tracy, thank you so much for being so open and candid with your journey with us. I, I, I could only empathize, but I could only imagine when my parents found out that I was about dying from a car accident, right? And then what my survival would be. And then once I did make it, my chances, they said I'd either be a vegetable or, yeah, be a vegetable or die. So, so follow up, as a Black woman from the Caribbean, and you have a daughter or a child with a disability, how did your culture, your family, extended family receive it? And if you could contrast, if you don't mind, with how your husband or ex-husbands like responded, and if anything, because I believe he's of a different culture from you, right?
Very
So
much
if you
so.
don't
Yeah,
mind
no,
sharing.
I'll be happy to. And
Okay.
those are all really good observations and questions. And just let me say that along with your parents and your family, your extended family, Atik, we were extremely, extremely
Mhm.
worried about you during
Everybody
those
was
dark moments.
very
So
nervous. Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was tough for everyone, and obviously for you more than anyone. But yes. So my ex-husband. Is British. He's a white British man who grew up in the southern part of the UK. And we definitely came from very different cultures. But he was very much on board with the way
Mhm.
I wanted to handle the pregnancy and my decision to embrace the child that we were given. We're not extremely overtly religious people, but we are believers, and that I think helped with our decision about how to go forward with creating life. That said, he was not a naturally warm, involved kind of father.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
But he definitely he was he it did not his family, he and his family were both very open and very welcoming, receiving. There was I felt nothing untoward was not said or was unsaid, or I felt was in the background.
Mhm.
They embraced everything.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nobody really, none of us knew. We didn't have a master plan, or certainly didn't know anything a great
Mhm.
deal about raising a child with Down
Mhm.
syndrome. But everyone really they were good. They were good people, and continue to be. As a matter of fact, I was just emailing
Mhm.
my former mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, and just planning on going over to the UK and bringing Laura so that she can see her. She hasn't seen her in a couple of years. So
Wow.
they have
Wow.
always been a supportive family. I have to say that.
Mhm.
And on my end, even more so. My mother had passed away, by the
Mhm.
time my daughter was born, but she was just a lover of people, and she I know that she would have
Mhm.
been a terrific grandmother. My father, no one really skipped a beat. They worried
Mhm.
about me. They did worry. They worried about.
Mhm.
It's not uncommon for, especially when you don't have a prenatal
Mhm.
diagnosis, for even with postpartum depression is something that can happen to anyone, and so they worried about that with me, just because it
Mhm.
was a surprise. And but I have a brother and two sisters, one of four. They were terrific. They really, really were. They just, to this day, they, for them, my children are part of the family. What they've learned over the years is that everyone has their challenges. Some present in some ways, some in others. And we have, our family really has been great. I have no complaints about that. And one of the nice things about being part of the Caribbean culture is that they just roll with it. I mean, that there is no stigma. You take care of your kids, you take care of your people. The community embraces you. They meet you where you are. And I've not felt anything but warmth from the community, and that's true for the most part, the American Black community as well. We have not had any negative things like that. I mean, one thing about Laura anyway is that she's very sparky and engaging, and I think. Yeah, it's sometimes too much. Yeah. But I think more than anything, she's really she's opened doors. I mean, I by having a child with Down syndrome, I've met some of the nicest people in the world. I've embraced a community that I would never have embraced before, and it gives you faith in humanity when you meet people who just want to help you. Just kind, and helping her develop into, a confident young lady has been definitely the whole village concept comes to mind, because you need everybody. You need your friends, your family to be on board, and it really hasn't been bad. I have not felt what I know people have talked about, where cultures are hiding their children or don't want to talk about them or don't want to, or feel ashamed or whatever. And some of that for me anyway was that, as a science major, I have some basic comfort with biology and genetics and development, and I know that a genetic abnormality is part of life. It's part of nature. It's, you plant a bunch of tomatoes, one or two of them are gonna come out looking different. And that's just the way genetics works. And they taste great, just the same, but they look different. And so I was concerned about mothering and making sure that I was doing the best to help her develop, but I wasn't upset per se by the fact that she had a genetic difference,
Okay, I feel like I'm hearing some funniness. Does anybody hear that?
I'm not sure. I just drank this cup of coffee that has a big noise to it, so I hope that wasn't it. I'm trying to be quiet.
So, I mean, I've met Laura at the gala, I think last year or 2 years ago, and she's fantastic. She was so vibrant. She was in the fashion show, and I think, did she also sing or something? She was
who knows?
The star
this girl will get up and sing or dance. She's hilarious. At that particular gala, they have there's what they call a community chorus at Gigi's, right? In Gigi's, New York, and they meet once a week and they sing songs and whatever, and they perform at the gala. Well, Laura was not part of the community chorus.
Wow, I definitely thought
you would not know. You would not know, because when she saw all her friends on stage, there was no stopping her. And Laura, you can't. Oh no, mommy. And I think our community has just learned to embrace Laura for the strong personality that she has, and she's a good egg. She likes attention, but she's sweet and she's interesting and very funny. She's got a great sense of humor. Definitely a challenge sometimes. Boy, she has her own mind, and we her mothers and daughters are But it's been interesting, fascinating, and a real pleasure to be a parent to her and to mother her. And she and her father have their moments because they clash from time to time. But they see each other and they spend time together. And I don't think that her relationship with him will ever be as strong as it is with mine. But that's not uncommon. Yeah.
So fast forward, you have a son after Laura, and your son has autism. If you could just summarize or take us through that, and the same kind of questions.
Sure.
How did you and your family receive the news, and how is he doing?
Yes. That's interesting because I was thinking about it prior to the podcast, of course, and my experience, and largely our family's experience with Andrew and his diagnosis is almost the polar opposite of Laura's, in the sense that everything about it was different. It took me a couple of years to even decide that I did want to try to have another child. I thought it would be helpful for Laura to have a sibling, and I felt that I had settled into motherhood. I was prepared to open up my heart again, and I didn't think I would be able to. I kept thinking to myself, I don't think I could love another child like this child. I don't think I could figure out how to make room in my heart for another child. But God has his ways, and I felt like I was ready, and I was still married, and my husband said, yeah, let's do it. And I approached it in exactly the same way. I prayed for a healthy and happy child, and I didn't want to do any special testing unless
this time
same
around.
Thing.
I had the
same doctor. I had the same OBGYN, and she was now completely 100% on board. She's like, okay, let's do it. But of course, by this time I'm 44, and I think by the time he was born, I was 45. So now I laugh and I say I went from advanced maternal age to geriatric mom at that point. I mean, it was on and on and on. Now there were things that I could not opt out of. Like my doctor was like, nope, you have to come in towards the end of the pregnancy. I was in the office every week to check this and check that. Mainly more for me than for the baby. But I felt I was blessed. I felt fine. I still felt good, and everything was fine. By that time I had a lot more information about Down syndrome for sure, and I thought, well, if I have another child with Down syndrome, all the therapists and the supports and things that I had in place, they'll just seamlessly go right over there. And that was really my only concern. Without doing an amnio, the best diagnostic tool that they have for Down syndrome was what they call it. At the time, it was called a level 3 ultrasound. So it was an ultrasound that specifically looked at, or not specifically, but as part of it. Looked at the development of the nasal bridge of the baby, and if the nasal bridge was developing well, then that was considered to have, well, if there was no nasal bridge, or the nasal bridge was quite low or not well developed, then that was a high likelihood that the baby had Down syndrome. So I said, okay, let me go ahead and do a level 3 ultrasound, so that if it looks as if my baby was going to have Down syndrome, all these things I can just kind of ramp everything up. Well, the level 3 ultrasound came back fine. The nasal bridge was developed just fine. And so I went on my merry way. He was born without incident. My deliveries have always been fairly uneventful. I delivered both babies very easily in short order, and off we went. I was happy to have a boy. Great fun. I would say by the time he was about 1, I started to get a feeling that not necessarily that something was wrong, but that he was presenting differently than Laura. Now that itself wasn't wasn't alarming to me, because I had not had a child who was, what they call neurotypical these days, or typically developed. So I really, all I really knew was what I read or whatever. But I knew that Laura, for example, had the ability to look at me and look in my eyes for a long time. Like we would lay on the bed together and just stare at each other until she fell asleep. Andrew had a harder time with that. He would turn his head away. He wouldn't look, and I just thought that was odd.
Even as a baby.
Even as a baby, I just okay. Well, he's and then I would mention it. And I mentioned it in a couple things, and people said, "Well, he's a boy. Boys develop a little differently, what have you." By the time he was 2, he really didn't have the vocabulary that was expected. His attention again seemed different, and I started to get this feeling that something wasn't right.